All right, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen that are listening online, ladies and gentlemen that are in the room, thank you for coming to this event. Why are we here? We're here because you've got an election on the 26th of November for the state of Victoria. And particularly the last 2 years, but really the last 10 and 11 years, the way things have been running, people are very upset. Now, if there's one thing that we all have in common in the room and listening on the stream, we care about our families, we care about our religious values, we care about the social fabric that makes this society. And Daniel Andrews has been threatening that over some time now. Now, when it comes to the people fighting back against this, it's been very encouraging to see average Victorians rising up and volunteering, putting their hand up, first in the federal election, but also for this state election. So the structure for today, just so you know, I'm your MC for the day. I'll be your guide for this particular event. But I also run Turning Point Australia. I wear many hats. I'm a political activist, a journalist, and a political commentator. And the Turning Point Australia platform acts as a means to get people elected that will do a better job than Daniel Andrews. Now, we've got some esteemed guests today, which I'm very much looking forward to introducing. We've got Bill Muehlenberg, we've got Bernie Finn, we've got Warren Pickering, we've got Lyle Shelton, and we've got Aidan McLindon. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of them. Bill is the non-political one. He's more the commentator, providing you a bit of a general understanding of the politics in Victoria, and the other speakers will be from their respective parties. I'll give you a bit more detail about them before they speak, and that'll give you an insight into who you can perhaps back this election on these particular topics. Now, Turning Point Australia, what do we do? What do we actually do? So we were set up at the 1st of September last year, in the middle of the lockdowns in Sydney. I'm from Sydney. Victoria is not my home. But when I see what's going on in Victoria and across Australia, it's very clear people have no idea how to get the outcomes that they want in elections. That's where I come in. I try to educate people on a wide range of different things. We've built an audience of 250,000 people across all different platforms on social media, and that has acted as a means by which to get around the mainstream media, get the information to people, and subvert some of the political parties in the elections, because it's not an even playing field, let's be honest. Now, in the federal election, there are a number of projects that we rolled out. One of these was the Turning Point Australia How to Vote cards. These were very successful. They ended up reaching, I think in New South Wales, something like 110,000 people. In Victoria, I think it was over 50,000 downloads. And that was a rock bottom minimum amount of votes. And the way that would work is it'd show you how to preference your card so that it would be for people of conscience, people that actually have values that represent what you agree with. And this election, we're doing the exact same thing in Victoria. And we're giving the preference power back to the people so that they understand exactly what's going on. So that's the first of the projects we're rolling in Victoria. We've later on, I'll be explaining 3 other projects as well. We've got informative graphics. We've got a way to channel the Turning Point Australia audience into volunteers. And we've also got a mystery project, which I won't be speaking about today, but I'll be rolling it out in the coming weeks, which I think it's a game changer. It might actually get us banned on social media, and that's an easy thing nowadays. But I think this particular one is going to it's going to be a manual ban. It won't be an algorithmic ban for those technical people listening. But today we are going to start off by listening to some esteemed guests. I think I'm definitely the youngest speaker here. Our first speaker is Bill Muehlenberg, who is an apologist and ethicist. He has his own ministry called Culture Watch, which features Christian commentary on the issues of the day. He's the author of Strained Relations, The Challenge of Homosexuality. Today he will be covering the main issues that concern particularly Victorians of faith. Bill, welcome to the stage. The audience is yours.
Thanks for that, Joel, and thank you for coming out today and tuning in. It's an honor to be with so many champions of faith, family, and freedom. That's why we're here. That's what we're concerned about. So when I was asked to give about a 15-minute overview of the crimes and misdemeanors of this current government, I sort of laughed. We could use a few days to go through it properly, but my 50 slides will do it in 15 minutes, so hold on to your hats, but we will look at what Dan and Labor has been up to and why it really is time for a change. So those watching are, by and large, interested in these three things: faith, family, and freedom. And they're all under sustained attack last 10, 20 years. So we're here to remind you of what we've had to endure and how hopefully things can change for the better in a few weeks' time. So to do that, we have to recall what Dan and Labor have been up to over these years. So many things we can mention, obviously, if you're pro-life, as you should be. We recall that, well, he was first health minister, and he brought in some pretty draconian legislation, but it got worse when he became premier in 2014. So we'll begin with the life issues as some of his crimes and misdemeanors. 2008 was the year when probably one of the world's worst abortion laws were kind of rammed through the Victorian Parliament. Even when the good guys tried to at least slow it down, add a bunch of amendments to it, all that was knocked back, and it was a sad day indeed in 2008. So a whole range of things went with that, of course, even things like prayerful, peaceful counseling outside of an abortion mill. All that was banned. You have to be 150 meters away just to pray, hopefully chat with a few of the people going in. But this is all part of the legacy of Dan Andrews. And of course, to offset that, one of our speakers, of course, Bernie Finn, has launched an annual March for the Babies, which I've been to most, and many of you have as well. And to give you an idea what we're up against, the picture on the right is not photoshopped. Bernie would have seen it. I saw it. Thousands of us saw it. A guy holding the sign, right? The only good baby is a dead baby. This is kind of the mindset, not just of a few wacko extremists, but in a way, it really is the mindset of Labor and Dan Andrews. They really are anti-life. They really don't care for babies and for life throughout, from cradle to grave. So plenty of things involved in this. For example, 2017, girls as young as 11 being able to get prescription for contraceptive pills without their parents' knowledge. That's just one of many things that have been pushed here in Victoria. We could do this all day just looking at these sorts of things. Of course, euthanasia, the other end of the spectrum. Once again, some of the worst, some of the most radical laws passed. This in 2017. It seems Dan and Labor have this incessant war against life. Of course, all the radical sexual agenda items of the radical left, certainly targeting children. We could spend a lot of time looking at those, and some of the other speakers will as well. Kids from birth to 5 are now being taught in our daycare centers all about gender neutrality, gender change, the whole radical trans, homosexual agendas. That's now being pushed thanks to the Andrews government. 2016 amendment, birth, death, marriages, where anybody basically can change their sex on their birth certificate simply by claiming or stating they no longer identify as who they are, but as the opposite sex. So this is just one of many features of the Andrews government that we've been living through. Of course, the whole sad, safe school saga, we could spend a lot of time on that one. Doesn't matter if they change the names on that, right? Whether it's called respectful relationships or any number of other euphemisms for what they're on about, but Andrews and Co. has been at the forefront of pushing all this. And of course, as you probably know, La Trobe Uni here in Melbourne has been a big part of this. Dan and the gang at La Trobe have been arm in arm. So Roz Ward on the bottom, as you can see, she's been a big figure in all of this, very blatant, very proud in what she wants to do. She says, hey, I not only teach your kids how to be a good homosexual, I teach them how to be a good communist as well. So please invite me to your schools. And sadly, many schools have. And then you got guys like Dowsett on top, who has in the past been quite open about things like pedophilia. So this is the kind of people, mainly at La Trobe, but elsewhere in academia, Dan Andrews is good buddies with and quite happy to push their point of view. So Roz Ward, again, the Marxist, well, as you can see, buddies in arms, literally. The former Victorian Labour Health Minister as well. So these guys are happy bedfellows doing each other's bidding. And of course, as we say, children are the ones who suffer massively. They're being targeted deliberately, right? If some of these groups cannot procreate, well, what do? You recruit, sadly. That's how they kind of gain their numbers. So targeting kids with books like The Gender Fairy and so on, or saying Jesus would support safe schools and the like. This is what we're up against. This is the kind of stuff our kids are getting every day in schools. Now we got to keep moving here. The homosexual agenda, of course, fully pushed by Dan Andrews. He loves everything they do, it seems. So as you know now, and some of the others will mention this, you can get 10 years in jail if somebody comes to you and simply asks for counsel, prayer, unwanted sexual attraction. Right now, that is illegal in Victoria. So basically, this whole push against so-called conversion therapy, it's a war on those who are looking for help. Andrews has declared war on the family. And of course, he's aided and abetted in the upper house, as we all know. People like Fiona Patton of the Sex Party, now the Reason Party, pushing all the radical agenda items along with the Greens, right? Let's liberalize and legalize all prostitution, drugs, you name it. They cut deals with each other, and that's how they get along. Then we can speak of Christophobia, which is rank and unleashed here in Victoria, whether it's Dan Andrews chewing out Margaret Court, right, for having a court named after her, and Australia Day honors. She happens to be the world's greatest ever tennis player, but because she dares to be a Christian and a biblical Christian, Dan doesn't like her. And of course, more recently, right, our one-day wonder at Essendon, Dan Andrews doesn't like him as well. He said this about him and his church: these views are appalling, they're hatred, bigotry, just wrong, which, by the way, seems to me violates just about every principle of his own religious discrimination laws, right? So even my own federal member, Michael Sukar, got it right when he said, this is what we're up against. This is what Victorians are experiencing. And of course, he even taken on Melbourne's Archbishop on this matter. He's not afraid to take on any Christian who dares stand in his way. So look, so many other things, banning hymns, Christmas carols, religious instruction. This is all part of his agenda. But we have to keep moving. I like what the Australian said. This is an article of faith for Labor, to attack the church, to attack the faith. And of course, I and most of you happen to have the extreme displeasure living in the harshest, longest lockdown anywhere in the world. It was hell, I can tell you. I never want to go through that again. The kind of things that we had to go through, including pregnant women in their jammies being arrested on Saturday mornings in their own home in front of their children. This was Dan Andrews' Victoria. Try to get some watermelon or whatever at Victoria Market. This is the kind of scene you would face. And of course, dare to speak out for freedom. This is what you got. So this is, you expect North Korea, Communist China. Well, this was Victoria. Fines up to $100,000 a day just for going outside to play a little footy, being forced to mask up, you name it. Of course, 800 plus killed in the hotel quarantine fiasco. I've got a slide. In the middle of this health pandemic, cutting 000 calls. Now people are dying trying to get an ambulance. 6,000 nurses still treated as lepers, being locked out of their jobs. On and on it goes. Of course, we had this $600 million quarantine facility, basically never used. Another waste of your money. In fact, just before, a few weeks ago, he decided, oh, the pandemic is over. How convenient, just before the election. So, and by the way, he's getting a very hefty increases in his pay, and then there's a whole raft of corruption scandals. We could, do this all day, right? CFA, red shirts, bullying, and the cost to you, the taxpayer, right? We're the ones being slugged with these billions and billions of dollars. So sadly, he's the Teflon man. It seems anytime he goes to a commission or inquiry, oh, I can't remember. How convenient again. So, building dams, oh, climate change, we won't get any rain. As far as I recall, in the last few days, we've had some of the worst floods in the last half century. Thanks, Dan. Anyways, it is time, if you want to make Victoria great again, to sack Dan. And by the way, Libs are not, sadly, much better. Matthew Guy has been kind of a light Labour, sadly. So I'm not just picking on Labour here. And imagine, by the way, kicking out your best Christian performer. So that tells you a bit about the Libs. So that's why we're here. We care about freedom. Victoria deserves better, and others will give you more reasons why we need a change of government. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Bill. Up next, we have the Honourable Bernie Finn. Bernie has represented the Western Metropolitan Region in the Legislative Council since 2006. Before that, he was the member for the electoral district of Tullamarine in the Victorian Legislative Assembly from 1992 to 1999. Today, he's leading a big change in Victoria, for the Democratic Labor Party this election. In a moment, Bernie will be speaking on abortion, euthanasia, unrestrained prostitution, and the abuse of parliamentary process. Bernie, welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you, Joel and Bill. Well done. That was a pretty sensational effort to get through that many slides in 15 minutes. I'm impressed. Well done. As Joel said, I am the leader of the Democratic Labor Party in Victoria, and if you told me that in the lead up to the last election that I would be going into this election as the leader of the DLP, I probably would have had you committed. Because at that point in time I was a very happy member of the Liberal Party and very enthusiastically working hard to elect Matthew Guy as Premier. Well, isn't it amazing what happens over a short period of time? Because whilst we have a Premier who is the worst that we have ever seen in the state, without question, a government which is the worst that we've ever seen in the state. As Bill said, Matthew Guy is sadly not a lot better. And he proved that just a few months ago when he threw me out of the Liberal Party for being pro-life. He said I could be pro-life, he just said I couldn't say it. So work that out. I'm sure there's some split definitions there somewhere, but that was the view. So here I am now as the leader of the DLP, a party that I first joined when I was 13 years of age back in 1974, which is a little while ago, and it's just a delight. I should actually send Matthew a card and thank him, because I haven't enjoyed politics so much for years as I have over the last few months, being with people who actually agree with me, and a party that's actually supporting me. So that is really something. And this party, this DLP that I have rejoined, it is a conservative Labor Party. It's what the Labor Party used to be before the Commos took over. That's basically what it is. We are a party that believes in workers. We are a party that believes in small business. We are a party that believes in traditional families. We are a party that believes in freedom. Indeed, we are the original Freedom Party. We split from the ALP in 1955 over the issue of freedom, and we have held freedom dear since that time. So it's coming up on 70 years of my. If my arithmetic is correct, and it probably isn't, but it's coming up on 70 years, I believe, and we strongly believe in freedom, as indeed the other speakers here do today. Now, we have seen over the past 8 years some appalling things. But possibly the most appalling thing that I've seen since I returned to Parliament, it was my first term in the Upper House, was the Abortion Law Reform Act of 2008, where the then Labor government, under the control of the Health Minister, Daniel Andrews, removed all legal protection for children before birth. All legal protection. In this state, abortion is available to be committed at every month during pregnancy, right up until a child would otherwise be born. If you kill a baby at 8.5, 9.5 months, as long as the baby isn't born, that's fine. That's fine. That is perfectly legal. Daniel Andrews did that. As Health Minister, Daniel Andrews did that. Later on, he stopped people from standing outside abortuaries, offering help. Can you believe in this country, in this state, we have a situation where if you offer somebody in trouble help, you go to jail. You go to jail. What an extraordinary situation. But that's what we have seen happen in Victoria. And of course, there has been significant persecution of the pro-life community, significant persecution of those people who hold the sorts of values that indeed we all do. It is absolutely extraordinary. As Bill said, we have a war going on in this state, a war against the people by the government. And we've seen that in very real terms over the last 2.5 years. We've seen it in the streets. But there's a war going on against children in particular. And there are others who are going to speak about that, and Bill certainly made reference to it. And that war against children begins in the womb. The womb should be the safest place for children on this earth. That's where they should be the safest in the world. But they're not. But they're not. And as we stand, or as I stand here, as you sit here today, there are babies being killed in this state, in this city. Probably not far from where we are right now. There are babies being killed. And if we try to stop that, Daniel Andrews will lock us up. He will send his political police in and he will lock us up. And whilst I have the greatest of respect for the men and women of the thin blue line, police command stinks. And apart from the politicisation of the education system, the politicisation of Victoria Police Command is the greatest scandal of the Andrews government. I feel, as a pro-lifer in Victoria, I feel like a black man in Mississippi in 1964. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. It is just phenomenal. And of course, it was Daniel Andrews who went to the election in 2014, vowing and declaring that he would never legalise euthanasia. We took him at his word. How stupid were we? Because, of course, he did a backflip. He said one thing, he did the other. He does that quite often. Daniel Andrews is one of the best liars on the face of the earth. Or is it the worst? I'm not sure. Take it whichever way you will. But he did it again on the euthanasia issue. He said that he would never legalise euthanasia, but that is exactly what he did. That is exactly what he did. And he pushed it. We sat there all night, and he pushed it through the Parliament, just as he did the abortion bill. And you know, when you get to a point in Parliament where you just can't think anymore. I mean, some suggest that going into Parliament means you can't think, but there are there are times in Parliament where they make you sit to a point where you just cannot have any cognizance of where you are and what you're doing. And that is the point that Andrew's pushed us. And he does it, and he hasn't done it for a while, but he certainly, in these controversial pieces of legislation, that's what he does all the time. And for that, I believe he stands condemned. So we have euthanasia in this state. So we're not just killing babies at the beginning of life, we're killing old people, we're killing the sick at the end of life. And you can't tell me that older people do not feel a responsibility to die now. You know, people talk about the right to die. Forget that. You know, older people, sick people, those who might feel that they are a burden, they will feel the obligation, the responsibility and the obligation to die. And that is only going to get worse. Thank you, Daniel Andrews, for your contribution to the sanctity of life. Such a great Catholic. Such a great Catholic. Isn't he just? Now. We know that Daniel Andrews has got a lot of legislation through Parliament by doing deals with his mates. Those mates include Fiona Patten, who I pray, and I got kicked out of the Liberal Party for praying, but I pray still that Fiona Patten will feel the cold steel of the voters' sword on the 26th of November. If ever there was a more dangerous individual who sat in the Victorian Parliament, I don't know who it is, because she is a shocker. But of course, she and Daniel Andrews have been very, very close, very, very close. If she puts up an idea, they'll say, "Oh no, we won't support that." But 6 months later, they'll introduce it as their own. And she put up a bill earlier this year to remove the Lord's Prayer. And of course, the ALP didn't support that. But Dan did say, if we win in November, we'll review it. Let me tell you here today, if Daniel Andrews wins on November 26th, the Lord's Prayer in this state, in this Parliament, is finished. That's it. That's it. And that is a fact. That is a reality. I'm not a clairvoyant. You don't have to be a clairvoyant to see that coming, because Daniel Andrews has made it very clear that they will be revisiting the Lord's Prayer after the election if he is still Premier. Good reason to win Mulgrave, I would have thought, Aidan, and a few others running around Mulgrave as well. So there's a whole lot of things going on. How long have I got to go, Ed? Have I got 10 minutes? Oh, okay, I'm just relaxing. Look, I have seen some extraordinary things happen during the course of this Parliament. As I say, we have been pushed beyond our physical and mental capacities on a number of occasions to get legislation through, which is quite frankly just appalling. And there has been an orchestrated and a concerted attack on people of faith. And as I've said to the Board of Imams, as I've said to the Islamic Council just over this last week, it's not restrained to Christians. Not constrained to Christians. It is in fact going to be against everybody who believes in God. Because let's face it, the Christians and the Muslims on these sorts of issues are as one. We are as one. And the government will persecute us all. And they're going after the kids. Others will make greater reference to this, but they are going after the kids. And they're it's almost as if they've adopted the old Jesuit slogan of grab them by six and you've got them for life. And that's what the ALP is doing now. I see it with my own kids. And it's just appalling what's happening in the state. Just appalling what's happening in the state. It's just extraordinary that we would have a government which has an education system which is telling kids not how to think, but what to think. And if you don't think that way, then there's something wrong with you. That's the message that they give. If you don't think the way they do, there's something wrong with you. This is a premeditated, a deliberate campaign to infect, and I use that word advisedly, infect the minds of Victoria's kids. If you can't kill them before they're born, let's get them as soon after, and we'll poison their minds then. It's just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. And we've got people like Fiona Patton, like Andy Medic, who believes that animals are more important than babies. He said that. I've heard him say it. These people who, quite frankly, some of them are nuts. But we used to think they were nuts. These days, we're the nuts. We're the ones who are being locked up because our views are unacceptable, or we're being intolerant. Isn't it amazing? Yeah, isn't it amazing? The people who call us intolerant wouldn't know tolerance if they fell over it. You know, if it jumped up and bit them on the left leg, they wouldn't know tolerance if it was handed to them. That's what we're dealing with. Those of us who are supportive of conservative principles, supportive of Christian values, that's what we cop every day. And this election is just so important to change that. Now, this election is the one we must draw a line in the sand. You know, no more of this. No more of this. We are not going to put up with this any longer. And if we do, you know whose fault it is? Us. It's our fault. It's our fault. So it's our responsibility to stand up at this election and tell Daniel Andrews what he can do with his policies that are discriminating against traditional families, that are discriminating against believers in God, against churches, against people who want to live their lives in a peaceful and caring way, but with God involved. This is our opportunity to tell Daniel Andrews, no more, no more. And the way we do that is by turfing him out next month. Because you know, as well as I do, that if Daniel Andrews gets another 4 years, he will take that. He will take that as an endorsement by the public of Victoria at what he's done over the past 4 years. Oh yes, there'll be lockdowns back. Don't worry about that. They'll be locking us down again. Locking us up again, perhaps I should say. That'll be happening. That'll be happening. The campaigns against our kids, the poisoning of minds, that will continue. That will grow. That will grow. That will continue. So we have, I think, a responsibility, an obligation to stop this, and to stop this now. Stop it dead in its tracks. And if we don't, then we have to live with what we sow. What you sow shall you reap. And that's exactly what we face next year. And can I give you another piece of advice? If Dan Andrews does get back, do not get between a Victorian population centre and the border. You will be killed in the rush. Because I know so many people who cannot wait to get out of the place if he gets back in. They're already planning. And I'm getting messages from people in Queensland saying, enough, we've already got enough Victorians up here. You know, the price of accommodations are going through the roof, you know, the cost of living is going through the roof, and it's all you Victorians' fault. You know, throw him out and stay there. Oh, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm more than happy to do that. Sadly, as I say, the opposition isn't much better, and Bill pointed this out as well. The opposition isn't much better, but anything is an improvement on Daniel Andrews and what he has done to our state, and perhaps even more importantly, what he will do to our state if he is re-elected. Because this guy's ego is totally out of control. He thinks he is better than each and every one of us. And those on the left will take his re-election as a sign that they are. We can't let that happen. We can't let it happen. Let's stand up on this occasion and not just vote against him, go out and work against him. campaign against him. We've got four parties here today that are all, well, pretty much united as one, I think. We might have minor disagreements on what, I'm not sure, but we all as one. Don't just vote, go out and campaign and work hard to ensure that good people are elected to Parliament, because good parliamentarians make good laws. They make good government. And if you don't have good people in there, you're going to have neither. You will have neither. And you will have the continuation of what we have. So I thank you all very much for your attendance today. For those of you who are watching, g'day. And I thank you for tuning in, because this is a vital, an important, a crucial part in the history of this state. You know, I know every politician says that this election is the most important election in the history of the state. Well, let me tell you, this one is. I thought back in 1992 when I was first elected that was when we threw Kerner out. But let me tell you, that was nothing. That was nothing compared to the importance of this election. This one will decide the future of this state, or indeed if this state has a future at all. And it is up to every single one of us to do everything that we possibly can, everything that we can possibly do to remove the Andrews government, or at the very least ensure that he doesn't have a majority in the upper house. That is absolutely crucial as well, because he has a majority in both houses. I'm going to Queensland too. Let me tell you. Let me go. You know, that may well be invite Trump over to build a wall up there as well. It is what I say. It is an extremely important time in the history of this state. I ask you all to take it as seriously as it is, because if we don't, we're going to be stuck with this chap for an extended period, and what he will do from this point on, I fear to think. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. To those of you who are watching, thank you, and let's roll up our sleeves, folks. Let's do this.
Thank you, Bernie. Some very good points about that. You would be surprised how many people I've talked to, sitting MPs even, that have said they would move if Dan Andrews gets in. So let's give it our best shot. So yeah, look, the 300 people that are listening live right now, welcome to the stream. Pleasure to have you here. Please give it a share. If 300 people share this, that'll reach 15,000 people. That's how it translates. So even if you're from New South Wales, give it a share. There'll be someone in there, one of your friends that's from Victoria. Get it out there. These people need exposure. They're not getting it from the mainstream media. That's why we exist. And if you've got questions in the audience sitting here now, please remember to write it on a piece of paper and put your hand up, and I'll come grab it off you. And we'll ask those at the end. But up next, thank you, Bernie. Thank you for that. That was invigorating. I can't wait to clip that up and put it out there. People are going to love it. Up next, we've got Warren Pickering, who served for 7 years in the Australian Army as a combat engineer. After his full-time service, he transferred to the Army Reserves and gained employment in the central Queensland coal industry. After being stood down due to the jab mandates in the coal company he worked for, he took up the fight in the federal election earlier this year as the lead Senate candidate for One Nation. Once again, he's leading One Nation in Victoria this election. Warren will be talking about the attack on parental rights, the attack on the family unit, and drug injecting rooms. Warren, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, everybody. Probably in typical One Nation fashion, I'm going to go off script a little bit, and this is our first alliance in Victoria, so I'm going to give you some additional information on how One Nation can assist Victoria in this, I'll say, time of need, to put it bluntly. All right. I may be somewhat less articulate as Bernie Finn. He's a tough act to follow, I won't lie, so I tend to write things down. Make sure we get everything. Now, I speak fast and I think fast. That's soldier speak, so if I go too fast, you can probably try to tell me to slow down. However, it's in my nature to just expect everybody to keep up. So we'll see how that goes. Good afternoon. My name is Warren Pickering. I am One Nation spokesperson and Legislative Council candidate for Eastern Region. I'm a local country Gippsland boy, grew up on potato country out here, and I am back to laying bricks, which was my trade of choice before joining the military. So firstly, on behalf of One Nation Party, I'd like to thank the venue owners and organisers. The opportunity to speak at this event, with the mainstream media having become the propaganda machine of the majors, opportunities to share our message via unbiased public platforms such as this are becoming increasingly challenging to find. I think we can all agree on that. My sincere condolences also go out to our communities in the north whom are enduring such hardships at this time. So feel free to, the online audience, feel free to email me if you have first-hand solutions to risk mitigate against potential future flooding. In your respective regions, we're happy to try and develop further drain and dam infrastructure policy to incorporate into our state policy, by the way, which is right here. This being One Nation's first Victorian state election, I'd like to make it known that we have a dynamic hand-selected team. We'll be targeting all Legislative Council regions and selective Legislative Assembly seats. We've developed Victorian state-specific policies that align with our federal values, yet adapt to the social and economic challenges of the Victorian people. Unlike the other gentlemen here today, I'm not and never have been an elected Member of Parliament. My background is construction as a bricklayer and the Australian Defence Force as a combat engineer. I'm a single father of an 18-year-old daughter, a small business owner, a passionate Victorian citizen. Over the last couple of years, I've felt an inherent sense of moral obligation to rectify the mistakes of the past and represent my community for the benefit of all generations of Victorians. This is what has inspired me to run for office. Many believe the modern Western world is a civilisation in decline. Well, I believe what we need right now, more than any time, is firm leadership and a steady hand. For good people of unshakable values, integrity and moral courage to stand firm in their convictions, take control of this ship, steer it off the precipice of social and economic collapse and deliver it safely into the hands of the next generation. I'm not a man of faith in the traditional sense, however I am spiritually minded. My mother's family are Albanian Muslims living in Western Footscray. My father's family were Catholic Scots. I myself was not raised with any particular monotheistic faith. We attended the occasional midnight mass at the local Anglican church of our small country town growing up, though I as a child personally never really felt the pull. This allowed me a unique perspective when I deployed with the Australian Army to Iraq in 2017. Where we instructed local Iraqi security forces in basic infantry tactics and close quarters combat in order to defeat Daesh, also known as ISIS, and to take back their cities of Mosul and Baghdad. Prior to this, I had not seen the unity of various faiths come together to achieve a common goal. Both Shiite and Sunni Muslims, Yazidis, both Kurdish and Iraqi Christians trained and fought side by side to purge the threat of ISIS in the name of national pride for the hope of a cohesive, peaceful future. While I've always considered myself to be a spiritual person, it wasn't until I discharged from full-time service that I, quite accidentally, stumbled into my own faith. I found my internal kingdom, what you might call Christ consciousness, through the ancient Eastern practice of Patanjali yoga and deep meditation. I believe our mere existence is an expression of something much bigger than ourselves. With it we assume a great responsibility to not allow it to be polluted physically, emotionally, mentally or spiritually for the benefit of all generations. Now, the One Nation Party has carried a lot of stigma over the years. A large portion of this has been instigated through propaganda and a deliberate effort to drag the party and our leader, Senator Pauline Hanson, into disrepute. But we're still here. We're growing stronger. Far from the right-wing party narrative the mainstream media would like you to think we are, I believe we're the last true bastion of conservatism in this country. If you don't believe me, I implore you to jump on the website and have a look at our federal policies. There's nothing right-wing about them. Now, the theme of the rest of my speech is one of unity through shared sentiment. So, off the back of the recent federal election, I gained a lot of experiences that I hadn't previously been exposed to. A few of us from the freedom-oriented Conservative and independent parties came together, including Aidan McLindon, in an effort to coordinate strategies to avoid further fracture of the vote. The common sense approach for me was that everybody should put their weight behind the more reputable minor parties, such as One Nation. However, the very next day, it seemed like every man and his dog went out and registered a state-level political party. Now, I know there's a lot of ego in politics, and I initially took this as ego-inspired action posing as compassionate nature. However, after the last few months, I've re-evaluated this position and changed my mind. I was wrong. While there's a lot of common values and shared sentiment between us, what's missing is trust. I believe this stems from our own innate need to protect our communities. We all believe, rightly so, that the governance of this state is far too important to leave in the hands of someone you don't yet know or trust and whose party we've never voted for. So therein lies a problem with our Conservative movement. While we are slowly getting to know each other and learning to trust each other, in an effort to create a unified front, it's a slow process that can't be hurried. In the meantime, the left are getting stronger too. We don't see them coming together in public forums to debate each other. They're unified in their projected public madness. Opportunities for us to come together, such as this one, need to be utilised, not to debate specifics of policy, but to show a unified front. This is how best we can inspire our communities. The encouragement of our people to educate themselves on how best to facilitate change through the effective exercise of their democratic right to vote. We cannot remain passive in the face of adversity. We rise, and in doing so, we raise the collective consciousness of our communities. We cannot capitulate and become shrinking violets in the face of vocal minorities. We also cannot allow ourselves to become triggered into emotional responses in the face of reasonable or irrational counter-arguments. We're better than that. We must hold ourselves to the standards that we expect of the others. French philosopher Voltaire once said, "I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." And I think this sentiment remains valuable and valid for our movement here and now. It's my firm belief that we are a nation of lions led by lambs. I see the power and passion in the faces of our Victorian communities. They want change, but they need our voices to achieve it. I could sit out here all day and highlight the inequities of the current dictatorship, the woke ideology that's infiltrated our schools, our politics, and even our pleasures of worship to some extent. The decimation of the family unit and community spirit feels almost deliberate. This is the crux of the shared sentiment that I've previously alluded to. We too must assume our share of responsibility through our own complacency for the current state of things. I'm sure that all of us here can agree that what we're seeing in the modern Western world is a triumph of mediocrity over merit, of ideology over intelligence, and hubris over humility. The easily triggered and extremely vocal left are so emotionally invested in the simplest of discussions that we, the common sense Victorians, are expected to remain silent on the most important discussions that we as a society need to have in order to face our collective future with confidence. All in an effort to accommodate the feelings of others, it concerns me that so many can be so easily triggered into an emotional response. We can remove emotional sensitivity from these discussions without the loss of compassion. While I always try to express it tactfully or diplomatically, I'll never apologise for speaking my own truth. These hard conversations are the ones that have contributed to the success of the capitalist democratic model that has now thrived for 2 millennia, while all others have been consigned to the dustbin of history. It's not perfect. It requires constant tweaking and an ever-evolving process that can only effectively occur through open, unbiased community dialogue and political discourse. So I'll not temper my voice into submission for the sake of a few hurt feelings. This is far too important. Victorians need not live in fear of retribution for voicing their opinions. I encourage everyone to reinstate their backbone in the place of the wishbone with which we've seen replaced somewhere along the way. I'll briefly touch on a few of our very much common sense state policies that I deem relevant to the current audience. We're quite proud of these. I'm probably going to cut into the next member's time, so I'll skip ahead. But we do have fuel and energy. We do have 10 other relevant policies in this document that you'll find on your seats. Those online will be able to find those on the One Nation Victoria Facebook page by late this afternoon. So energy, education, fuel and energy, I think those are huge for Victoria at the moment. We need to make it prosperous for business and families to continue to conduct business the way that we always have, to enjoy the life of prosper that we have. So education, despite a $24.8 billion federal budget for state education services, Australia continues to rank lower than comparable high middle income countries in achieving quality education outcomes. One Nation Victoria will restore critical thinking in classroom and reinstate the cornerstone of education while reading, writing, arithmetic and discipline. There should be no room for Western, white, gender, guilt shaming in any classroom, and instead children should be taught the benefits of a merit-based free-thinking society. Vaccine mandates. One Nation Victoria firmly opposes any and all COVID-19 vaccination mandate requirements. We promote sovereignty of the individual over all else. Neither employers nor governments reserve the right to impede on any person's bodily autonomy, ever. Governance. Victoria needs to implement IBAC and Victorian Ombudsman recommendations. As strong advocates for anti-corruption and the vocal proponents against increasing government overreach, will demand more transparency, more accountability, and will also push for Royal Commission into the management of the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent mandates. Religious freedom. One Nation Victoria believes in the inalienable right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. All persons reserve the right to religious freedom to both believe in, teach, practice and or observe in one's religious traditions, provided that these practices don't impede on or take precedence over Australian laws nor encroach on the rights of freedoms of other individuals or groups. I believe that religious freedom correlates in direct alignment with our democratic right to freedom of speech, action and movement. We reserve the right to exercise these freedoms any way we like, provided that they don't impede on the freedoms of others. We are One Nation, one of the few parties in the country, such as the other parties represented today, that do have a federal pro-life policy. In line with our open belief in freedom of thought, opinion and speech, we as individual party members reserve the right to a conscience vote. However, our federal policy, pro-life policy, is as follows. One Nation acknowledges the scientific fact that a human being's life begins in the womb. We were horrified when state governments passed legislation which legalised abortion up until birth for any reason. This law is one of the most extreme in the Western world. One Nation will seek every opportunity to roll back brutal and extreme abortion law so that both unborn babies and pregnant women will have the level of legal medical protection once again. We will reduce the gestational limit for abortions. Current legislation in some states allows abortion of an unborn child up until the day of birth. Obviously, we know now that this includes Victoria. Ban sex-selective abortion. We'll implement counselling and other safeguards. Women who may be considering abortion must be provided counselling and compassionate assistance. Medical care for babies born alive during an abortion. Neonatal care must be provided to babies born alive during an abortion, as would be given to any other child born at the same stage of pregnancy and in the same medical condition. Anaesthetised abortion. Current procedures across Australia only offer the mother anaesthetic when performing a surgical abortion. We'll restore doctors' rights, reinstate a doctor's full right to full conscientious objection to an abortion. We'll ban August harvesting and mandate data reporting, as current legislation fails to report abortion rates in some states. Obviously, that's our federal policy. Victorian policy will be in alignment with that as such. So, all stereotypes considered, I assume some of these policies may come as a surprise to some. However, I do personally harbour some unpopular opinions. For instance, if and when elected, I will not be holding the majors accountable to some of their pre-election promises. We as a state have accumulated the equivalent debt of the 3 states to our north combined. To continue to encourage reckless spending in pursuit of votes is not a viable alternative for me. $6 billion on hospitals without consideration for the provision of staff for said hospitals is outrageous. We have an abundance of staff, trained, qualified, competent and ready to return to work in both the health and education sectors. If we simply remove vaccine mandates, this will alleviate the burden on both paramedics and triage staff. We will not support the Metro Rail Link in its current format. A $50 billion budget blowout to $125 billion is unforgivable. That money would be better utilised to support state building infrastructure, including flood-proofing our regional areas, to encourage industry to these regions. This will provide long-term support for the exponential growth these populations have endured in recent years, with the dual benefit of alleviating congestion in suburban and metro areas. I would oppose the suppression conversion practice as an act as it's far too open to misinterpretation and amounts to further degradation of the family unit. This legislation could be used punitively to target parents who are only trying to protect their children from the extremes of gender theory. Our current leadership, and I use that term very loosely, are so far removed from the consequences of their actions that they make concessions on proposed legislation without due diligence in an effort to appease minorities at the expense of the majority. For far too long, and to our own detriment, we, the working middle class of Australia, have been too busy working to sustain this country's GDP to engage in political dialogue, and as a result we find ourselves drastically underrepresented at all levels of Parliament. To reinstate Victoria's faith in political process, we need to put aside the differences that serve only to separate us. Come together under firm leadership, smart policy and one banner. We at One Nation Victoria have that firm but fair leadership at all levels. We have that policy and have always been the flag bearer for the Australian working class. We alone can hold the Liberals accountable to their traditional conservative roots, all the while highlighting the inequities perpetuated by Labor's ideology throughout this slow demise into a socialist apocalyptic nightmare. We're the only party that can provide an uncompromising, genuine third-party alternative at the state and federal level within our lifetimes. I'm not normally one to engage in catastrophic thinking or negative rhetoric. In fact, I generally have quite a sunny disposition and quite alarming levels of what I still claim to be youthful optimism. I dream of the day that we can once again relax into the comfort of social and economic security. But first, we need to do this important work. I'm fiercely passionate about the world we've inherited and the state with which we leave it for our children and grandchildren. Every generation should live better than the last. I've always been a man of action, the kind of bloke who just gets it done regardless of the challenges associated with doing so. Challenges are an opportunity to grow and evolve as a community, and we do this, as we always have, in the open pursuit of viable solutions. So no longer will we stand divided by our differences. No longer do we wish to be represented by career politicians claiming to have our best interests at heart. No longer are we prepared to compromise on our children's future on empty promises in four-year re-election strategies. Together we're stronger, and it's time to take the power back. So let's stop wasting time with the majors. Let's put our collective strength behind the party that's always had the guts to say what it thinks. The party that's been fighting this battle alone for 25 years in one way or another. It doesn't matter what race, religion or creed we follow or what sexuality we are. We are one community working cohesively to achieve a common goal. We are one state ready to elect the leadership we finally deserve. We are one nation on the verge of great change. So put your faith in the One Nation Party of Victoria and let's get this done. Cheers, mate.
Well done. Very good. Thank you, Warren. Up next, we've got Lyle Shelton. Now, Lyle was the former director of the ACL from 2013 to 2018. He was also one of the leaders of the No campaign at the Australian Marriage Law Postal Survey in 2017. This election, Lyle's leading the Family First Party. Today, Lyle will be talking about family issues such as gender ideologies, males in female sports and private spaces. Lyle, would you like to come to the stage?
Well, thanks very much, Joel, and thanks very much to Ed from Cause and Joel from Turning Point Australia for putting on this amazing event today. And thank you to all those who are watching online. It's wonderful to have people participating in democracy. And I think the reason why we're in the mess we are in as a society is because we haven't had enough participation, and may forums like this and alternative media like this be the herald of something new and fresh. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the big question for this election here in Victoria is who will protect your family from the threat of radical political correctness? And I think the answer to that question is not Dan Andrews and it's not Matthew Guy. As Joel said, I'm involved in the leadership of Family First. I'm not running as a candidate, but I've been involved in the organisation and the rebirth of the party here in Victoria, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege to do so. And we've recently announced a wonderful field of candidates. I'll introduce some of them to you later. We'll be standing candidates in each of the 8 upper house divisions and as many of the lower house electorates as we possibly can. And it's exciting to see the momentum building. I've been asked to speak today on the issue of gender ideologies, issues of women's sport and these associated impediments to our freedom of speech and our freedom of religion that flow from these crazy things. So just a bit of history. This has emanated from this wonderful state of Victoria. You might remember that image there. That came, what was one of the original images of the Safe Schools Coalition. Back in about the end of 2014, this came on our radar. I was, as was said, at the Australian Christian Lobby at the time. Other groups were also involved, Family Voice Australia, the National Civic Council, Australian Family Association. We spent a big part of 2015, and of course Bill here in the front row, trying to get the public to understand this teaching that was going on in our schools. And that image there appeared under the Safe Schools banner with a slogan, "Gender is not uniform." And I must admit, I was shocked when I saw that. In fact, I said to my team at the time, that is so extreme, that's not going to go anywhere. Surely this will just be laughed out of town. But by the middle of 2015, we'd discovered that 300 schools around the nation were now running the Safe Schools program. It came onto the public consciousness about a year or so later when a very brave Victorian woman by the name of Chella White went public in the Herald Sun here and news.com. That's Chella there, one of the bravest women in Australia. And it was her going forward talking about this program in her son's school at Frankston High that brought this to the public's attention for the first time in any meaningful way. Of course, the principal of Frankston High during the marriage campaign, as Chella joined our campaign and tried to help explain to people that if we are going to degender marriage, this sort of stuff is only going to get a greater head of steam. And of course, the principal there said it never happened. Well, we know that's a big fat lie, and this is being laced right through our education system from early childhood onwards. Now, this is Kira Bell. If we fast forward a few years, Kira Bell campaigned against her gender clinic in London, the Tavistock Centre, and I'm sure everyone's heard of this, but perhaps some of those watching online have not. That quote there, and I'm sorry to have such an indelicate quote for our audience, but we need to understand just how grave all this is. That quote comes from an expert witness statement that Kira has kindly given to myself because I'm being sued back in my home state of Queensland by two drag queens who promote gender fluid ideology, and Kira has kindly provided an expert statement. Kira was 15, 16 years old when the Tavistock Centre put her on puberty blockers. She later, a few years later, went on to have a double mastectomy, and in her expert witness statement, she said, "I realised that I could never be a man, I'm a woman," and she has detransitioned. And as a result of her advocacy and her court cases in the UK, there was a review done by Dr. Hilary Cass, a leading paediatrician in the United Kingdom, and she concluded that these gender clinics were doing harm to children, and the Tavistock Centre was closed in July this year. That's an amazing thing, but why in the state of Victoria are we finding that we're closing coal mines and closing down baseload electricity, but we're keeping the gender clinics open? It's a big question. The most prominent proponent of gender fluid ideology and the medicalisation of children resides here in the state of Victoria, and that's Dr. Michelle Telfer of the Royal Children's Hospital here in Melbourne. And this is a chilling quote that she gave to a Royal Commission, a parliamentary inquiry, back in 2019. Now, I can't quite read that from here, but I'm going to paraphrase it for you. You can get a screenshot of it if you want to. But she is basically telling the parliamentarians that she doesn't have enough money or enough funding to provide reconstructive surgery to young women who are struggling with their gender identity and might want to change to become boys. And it's basically a pitch for further funds so that she can perform these sort of surgeries, which she calls reconstructive surgery, which really is taking the breasts off a young woman so that she can present as a man. Now, I don't want to belittle anyone's gender confusion or the struggle that goes with that, particularly children, but I think this is quite an horrific thing, and the fact that this is being advocated by someone who's a medical professional running Australia's leading gender clinic here in Melbourne, why that is being put forward, why she sees the need to perform this on minors, as the quote shows, is very, very chilling. So this is a real problem. And I guess the obvious question is, if they've shut down the Tavistock Centre in London for providing similar sort of services, why is Dan Andrews, why is Matthew Guy, why are all the politicians who are funding the gender clinics here in Australia and here in Melbourne, why are they not being asked questions about this? Why is the media not doing its job? Why are politicians not doing its job? They know this is going on. They've got Dr. Cass's review. They know it's caused harm. They know that other countries like Sweden and Finland are walking away and moving towards a more cautionary approach to treating children with gender dysphoria. Yet here in Australia, we've got Dr. Michelle Telford advocating for money so that she can perform double mastectomies on minors. It's chilling stuff. You can go on the internet and find these images. There are a dime a dozen now. It's right there for us to see. One of the other really, Bill's gone through the crimes and misdemeanours of Daniel Andrews, and it's hard to know where to start, and Bill only scratched the surface. But this, to me, is a real clanger, and it flows on from the whole gender fluid ideology issue. Now, this is a screenshot taken from the Victorian Department of Education website, and it says that if a child at school is wanting to transition their gender, so we're talking minors again, and the teachers become aware of it, if the child has confided to the teacher is to hide that information from the parents. Now, teachers shouldn't be hiding any information from parents, full stop. Parents have the right over their children. That's even recognised in international law. Yet here in the state of Victoria, in Dan Andrews' Victoria, and with a silent Liberal Party, we've got that statement on a Victorian Department of Education website that says a child's gender transition should be hidden from their mother and father. The other day I was, as I often do on a Saturday, ringing Family First donors to thank them for their generous contribution to our efforts, and I reached a woman who was living in Darwin in the Northern Territory whose son and daughter live here in Melbourne. And she said to me, this is really personal to me because my grandchild was transitioning at school, and my son and daughter-in-law didn't know about it for at least 6 months. And you could hear her voice quiver on the phone as she was telling me this. This is real. This is not just crazy activists in fringe minor parties going on about this sort of stuff. It's real. And there it is. It's in your grill. It's right there on the Victorian Department of Education website. Now, this is also another aspect. The change and suppression, aka conversion therapy bill, has been mentioned today. This is quite extraordinary because this is a screenshot from the Victorian Equal Opportunities Commission website, and it says there that if someone is experiencing change or suppression practice, even if they are seeking help, it's illegal for someone to render help when asked. Even if you ask for it, is the quote there. Again, this is on the website. They don't even hide this sort of stuff. Now, as we've heard today, a parent, a doctor, a priest, an imam, a counsellor, they can be sent to jail if they try and talk a child out of going off to Dr. Michelle's gender clinic, where she might be put on puberty blockers, just as Kira Bell was as a teenager, and even worse, perhaps if Dr. Michelle Telfer has her way, could have life-altering and irreversible surgery. So there it is. You cannot even try and talk someone out of it. If you see the danger and try and warn them, you can't talk them out of it. If they sense there's danger to themselves and seek your help, you still can't render them that assistance. This is unbelievable stuff. Who would have thought this could ever happen in Australia? Well, if we thought that the Liberal Party might provide some hope against the conversion therapy law that criminalises parents, that criminalises doctors, imams, pastors, counsellors, think again. Matthew Guy is on the public record as saying that he will not amend, change or repeal that conversion therapy bill. Now, that is a shameful thing. There is no hope in the Liberal Party to change that view. Now, yesterday, it appeared on social media, an advertisement from the Liberal Party to the Islamic community, from an Islamic community newspaper, where Matthew Guy said he would look at amending the Equal Opportunities Law, which takes away the freedom of Christian churches, mosques, religious schools to discriminate favourably towards those who share their ethos. Just it's common sense. Now, of course, the law in Victoria prohibits a school, a church, a mosque from discriminating favourably towards those who share their ethos. I mean, that's just obvious. I mean, I don't expect to rock up at the Pride Centre in Victoria and get a job as their media officer, even though I'm qualified in journalism. And you know, I can live with that. You know, I can live with that discrimination. They don't have to employ me. But the law here in Victoria says that if someone rocks up for a job at a Christian school and doesn't share that ethos, then you know that's against the law. Now, Matthew Guy has said that he's going to look at amending that law. Big tick for Matthew Guy, subject to consultation. Now, we all know what's going to happen there, just like Scott Morrison's consultation of the federal religious discrimination bill. Went on for 5 years and still didn't result in any legislation because it becomes a pile-on by the activists who do not tolerate any other group having any freedom. So, tick for Matthew Guy, yeah, he's thinking about partially restoring religious freedom, but He's on the public record as saying he won't overturn the gay conversion therapy law, which makes it a crime for a parent to even pray for their child who's suffering from gender confusion. This is unbelievable stuff, and that's got to change. And that's why we need parties like Family First, like the others here today, to put pressure on the Liberal Party, because they are not living up to the views of Sir Robert Menzies, who would be rolling in his grave if a Victorian leader was suggesting that a parent should go to jail for trying to talk their kid out of going to a gender clinic. Shame. Also, this is a screenshot from Matthew Guy's website. It's a bunch of Liberals at a Pride parade here in Melbourne. The other election promise that Matthew Guy has made is that he is going to fund two lawyers funded by the taxpayer, out of the Pride Centre in St Kilda. Now, what are these lawyers for? Well, they are there to litigate and to go after the Andrew Thorbans of this world, the Christian schools of this world that are simply wanting to uphold the ethos of the parent community. They are looking for activist discrimination cases that they can prosecute through the Equal Opportunities Commission. Matthew Guy is going to fund two more lawyers at your expense to go after people who have a different worldview, who have a different view on human flourishing, on what it means to be male or female, what marriage means, people who transgress the rainbow orthodoxy. They're going to have a couple of lawyers paid for by the taxpayer going after them. And I know this is real. I mentioned my legal case earlier, which that those who are suing me have lawyers that are funded by the LGBT Legal Service in Brisbane. Taxpayer funded, $400,000 you can find in their annual report. My lawyers, they're funded by donations, no government funding at all. Matthew Guy wants to weaponise the legal service here in Melbourne to go after people who have a different worldview. And I think that, again, this is another reason why we've got to have minor parties like ourselves putting pressure on the major parties to do the right thing and to realise that they can't just keep going along with this woke political correctness which is threatening us all. I was asked to talk about the issue of women's sport. Again, I would have loved to have thought that the Liberal Party might have offered us some hope here. I know I'm using a federal example, but as I was asked to talk about this sport issue, the most prominent proponent of trying to save women's sport, of course, has become in recent years Senator Claire Chandler from Tasmania, a very brave Liberal woman, and she has been relentless on this, along with more recently Catherine Deves, Liberal pre-selected candidate in Warringah. Think about the sort of flack that they copped from the Liberals, from the likes of Matt Keane, let alone what they copped from the LGBT lobby. Now, you know, you would have thought it would be no-brainer, but during the election campaign, federal election campaign, just this last May, when the heat came on Scott Morrison, he said the government does not have any plans for that, i.e. a Saving Women's Sports bill, to be a government bill. It's a private member's bill, and I have told you very clearly that my views on such a bill, so I've been up front. That's a little bit of doublespeak there, but what he's saying is that there's not going to be a bill from the Liberal Party to save women's sport. So they're quite happy to let Senator Claire Chandler go out there and make it look like the Liberal Party is doing something. And this is why it's so important that parties like Family First and the others that are represented here today are in this space, because there's so much smoke and mirrors in politics. Yes, there are some very, very good people running for the Liberal Party at this election, and I hope some of them I hope the good ones get elected. But this is what happens. They've got to be able to hold the likes of Peter Dutton, Scott Morrison formerly, Matthew Guy. They've got to be able to hold them to account. It's no good Liberal candidates coming along to forums like this and saying, yeah, we're going to save women's sport, we're going to overturn gay conversion therapy laws, we're going to restore freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and put up private members' bill, only to find that when the heat comes on their leader, they walk away from it. And this is Scott Morrison, supposedly a Christian. Well, he is a Christian. I shouldn't say supposedly, he is. But he's one who played his politics in a very pragmatic way, and of course was a huge disappointment. Well, this comes to the Family First team. That's 5 of the 8 lead upper house candidates for the Legislative Council that we'll be running. We'll be announcing another 3 very shortly. Lee Jones, who you might have seen in the media last week, is our lead candidate. He's a corporate executive. He has his own Andrew Thorban type story, which I hope he has the opportunity to talk about during the course of this campaign, where he was dismissed from a job he loved about 7 years ago, before this even came on people's radar. This is personal for our people. We've got Imad Hermiz up in Northern Metropolitan. Dean Cronkright down in Western, and Michael White up in Northern Regional. So these are top quality people. Of course, Alistair Cameron in North Eastern Metropolitan. And this is a team that won't back down. This is the team that's going to get in the way of the political correctness that threatens every family in Victoria. And that's the question. Who will protect your family from the threat of radical political correctness? That's the question that people need to ask as they go into the ballot box. And I'd encourage everyone, if you'd like to know more about Family First, if you'd like to volunteer, if you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to have a look at our policies, you can go to familyfirstparty.org.au. And I'd encourage everyone to be participants in this election. Let's not sit on the sidelines. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lyle. That was very moving. I am looking forward to putting that segment out. I think it's going to be really moving, and I think there's a lot of mothers out there that just find that butchery disgusting, and they will be sharing that around to their circles. Next, cap off the rank, we have Aidan McLindon, who was a member of the Queensland State Parliament from 2010 to 2012. He also served as an infantry soldier from 97 to 2002, and this election he is running against Daniel Andrews in his seat of Mulgrave under the Freedom Party. Aidan will be speaking on freedom of religion and speech, government overreach, and above-the-line voting ticket. Pay particular attention to the above-the-line voting ticket, because I will be picking up on it in some of my stuff immediately after Aidan. Aidan, the crowd is yours.
Thanks very much, Joel. And at the expense of getting in trouble with the cameraman, I'd just ask you to quickly stand up for just 10 seconds, have a stretch, because we've had 4 speakers. And as Bernie would know, there's nothing worse than being the first speaker, and that would be the 5th speaker, okay? So have a quick stretch. At the end of the day, as I say to my students, adults are just big kids. We all suffer a bit of, we don't want to get our deep vein thrombosis, etc. It's a little brain break, and we can be seated. And thanks very much, Joel, to yourself for this platform of Turning Point Australia, which I think is a very poignant title for this platform. To the viewers watching this currently or going forward, and to our audience here today, we are at a turning point in Australia, not just in Victoria, not just in Australia, but also for the West. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that we were the longest locked down city in the world, okay? Don't think for a second that Victoria is not a litmus test of a wider agenda. It is simple as that. So, in some respects, this is a bit of a Eureka stockade. It's, we can see the waves of the Brits coming in. We've got a certain amount of bullets and gunpowder, but we've had enough. We have had enough. And the name, Daniel Michael Andrews, and you know you're in trouble when your full name's been said. Make no mistake, this is just one name in a very big game, okay? It's the cabinet that sits behind him, it's the bureaucracy that sits behind him, it's the agenda that sits behind him, which therein lies the war, okay? He may very well be the figurehead, but it's a much larger battle at stake here. I like to think of it as the beliefs versus bureaucracy, or government versus God, and this is what this referendum is about. Yes, cost of living is, one of the front and centre issues. These are the day-to-day machinations of what's going in your wallet and what's going out. But the absolute reality is this is a referendum of whether or not we want to be a state of freedom where you have freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and freedom of movement. It's as simple as that. Okay, that is the elephant in the room. And to our brothers and sisters in the floodplains at the moment, I know I've got my parents in Moama, and my brother and family and friends and the students that I taught and the teachers in Echuca. Over the next 48 hours, they're going to go some pretty tough times. So we keep them in our thoughts and prayers. But we also have a righteous anger that our Premier, this Premier, because I don't consider him my Premier, has prevented SAS volunteers ready for deployment because they have not matched a mandate that was cruel and inhumane. They are sitting ready to deploy, but no. Whilst every other mandate's been dropped in every other sector, Daniel flies in a helicopter from town to town, basking in the light and preventing our fellow citizens from getting in there, rolling their sleeves up and helping them. People will die as a result of this decision. Houses will be wiped as a result of this decision. And we need to call him out for what it is. What game is being played? What is your objective? Preventing somebody from handing out a life jacket to our brothers and sisters. This is sick. It's disgusting. It's unacceptable. And he will be brought to account and held to justice in due course. Yes, we will forgive him, absolutely. That is what we do, but we'll never forget. Otherwise, it'll happen again. I've got a couple of disclaimers to make with my opposition in the district of Mulgrave, and my students always tell me, Mr. Mack, you look like Dan Andrews. I get it, my stupid glasses. Okay, through no fault of my own, I went to Specsavers and got a 2-for-1 deal 3 years ago. I've been forever regretting it, and I just haven't got time to get my eyes done again, so I apologise in advance. But it has worked in my favour to some people with language barriers in the district of Mulgrave, I can assure you. You know, they pat me on the back and said, oh, you're Premier. I said, no, I'm Aidan, not Dan, I'm Aidan. And of course, that doesn't stop them from taking a photo and, you know, smiling at the camera. And the only other thing I have in common is that our first job was that we sold hot dogs. So I sold hot dogs at Dreamworld at 14 3/4 as soon as I could get me foot in the door. And apparently that's what he sold as well. But thereafter, I think the difference between the member for Mulgrave is that he's sort of been in the slippery suit in Spring Street ever since. Whereas, you know, I've had quite a projected life, and I think that's where I believe my experience will come into play in one of the biggest challenges of my life that lies ahead. And I feel like an Australian at large because I was born in Darwin. I was raised in, you know, country Victoria, Whittlesea, and then at Western Districts in Hamilton. Then I was up in Brisbane for 25 years and dabbled in politics and got thrown around the washing machine there, you know, and then came back down 9 years ago to Echuca and to the Mornington Peninsula. So I think that's given me good insight too, though, of what we who we are as a culture and as a nation. And equally, I can be accused of running from party to party. I'll make no bones about it. I've been in 6 political parties, I think. I've lost count. But you know what? I've never ever compromised my principles. Never. I joined as a Liberal Party member in 1996. Okay, that morphed into the Liberal National Party coalition, which I was actually a part of on the committee to merge that in Queensland. Of course, I've helped Family First, been on the ticket in Family First. I've been Queensland Party, which I started in Queensland, which morphed into Katter's Australian Party. I mean, I understand the pulse of what we do, of what we have, and I'll touch on that in some of my closing notes of where we are now collectively and where we could possibly be going forward. So government overreach is obviously something that is impending on us upon, I was going to say weekly, but it's actually daily. And the amount of legislation, and Bernie, you would attest to this, the amount of legislation that they push through a sausage machine with very limited time for any member of parliament to properly get their head around it and decipher what's in those, you know, the devil of the detail. I think this agenda has been going for quite some time, where it's been pre-written, so don't underestimate the top echelons in bureaucracy. And the Freedom Party over the weekend, we announced that often, and many of you may not know, but in the lead up to elections, many Director Generals and people high up in the echelons of the bureaucratic system renew their contracts, whether it's 3, 4, 5 years it is, in Queensland, I'm aware. And they do that in the event there is a change of government, they get a 5-year payout. Well, our policy will be that we'll be holding all payouts until there's a full inquiry done about the last 4 years in terms of the response to the pandemic and what role those bureaucrats played in delivering advice that we were never seen before any payouts are made. Full stop. You will not be using our taxpayers as some sort of gift on the way out after the destruction you've caused in the background, and they will be held to account. Okay, the public service generally has done a great job because they're only beholden to their leaders above them, which then gives me a segue to how I see our faith leaders in Victoria and Australia. I must say, as a person of faith, yes, I've had my own journey with its ups and downs. I think that's the nature of who we are as humans. I am absolutely disgusted, okay, at a portion of our faith leaders, and this is a very clear message to you. In the last 2 years, many of you have been silent, which means you've been complicit. Some of you have put 50 cents each way. Well, you cannot serve 2 masters. And what I say to our faith leaders now, in 37 days, you have a choice to stand with your congregation and the faith that you espouse, or you need to move across and let someone from your congregation do it because you are not doing it now. It is not acceptable. This is a referendum on God or government. Simple. And I myself has been a victim of that as well, and I make no bones about it. Okay, the Archbishop of Melbourne, I'm sorry, but you do not terminate 1,200 people under your watch and refuse my 5 emails to you. Okay? That is not being a servant to the people. And that's the reason I've been put in a position now to hold class action against, which now currently has 117 teachers. Okay, as Warren touched on before, there is no crisis of shortage in our frontline sectors. The crisis is the government's decisions, the inhumane government decisions that created a two-tiered society, that put neighbour upon neighbour, that divided families, that divided our communities, that made teenagers check adults' medical advice when they wanted to simply go in and have a coffee. Okay? And to Shane Patton and the people and the leaders at the top of, as Bernie alluded to, one of the great travesties of what we've seen is that being cherry-picked and politicised. The good old days when you understood who your police officer's name was and you had a community connection. And when you saw a police officer, you knew you were safe. Now you're not quite sure. And I feel sorry for our brothers and sisters in the police force and what they've been subjected to do. But I equally thank those people who stood up for themselves and realised that they were more loyal to their people until before their job. You know, Crystal Mitchell comes to mind. There's a lot of people out there who have said they've taken a stand and said, you know what, I can't do this. And that's what I say to the faith leaders, you cannot serve two masters. Don't pretend you're protecting Australians and then following things that fundamentally cripple us. The education system, I can speak on some authority in this because I did, Bertie, I know you alluded to the amount of Victorians that went to Queensland. Well, I was one of the odd ones that came from Queensland to Victoria. And ironically, I actually started again because half the family was in Victoria, half was in Queensland. And I made the informed decision to get away from politics and reinvent myself as a teacher because, you know, after you've done 12 years in public life, you call it a day. And now I find myself in the epicentre of the bear pit. So, but I guess Vic Roads, you know, they predicted this years ago on their number plates when it had Victoria on the move underneath. So, but, you know, they probably knew something we didn't. But the Freedom Party of Victoria, with our small business policy, has said one of the options for Vic Roads, with our our reimbursement of GST to small to medium businesses, because what people don't really understand is that between 2019 and 2021, Australia produced an extra 100 billionaires. We went from 37 billionaires to 137 billionaires. Okay, so the gap between the haves and have-nots is real, and it's happening exponentially. Therefore, the top end will have a COVID release tax policy package that will be provided to small and medium businesses as from 1st of July 2023 for a period of 12 months and then will be reviewed. And then one of the options, of course, for the number plates will be Victoria open for business. Because we need to get our small businesses, they are the backbone. In the education system, it's been touched on. During those 2 years, I was actually helping 8 schools. I oversaw 80 schools from Richmond to Portsea. 8 of those Catholic schools were in the district of Mulgrave, and I've taught in several government schools in Mulgrave. And I can attest to what Lyle has touched on, that these children need support, care and compassion. They do not need to be used as political pawns, because these major parties thrive off division. Okay? These isolated instances where people are struggling, they are isolated, believe me, okay? I have the list of them in 80 schools, okay? I had to be that person, that go-to person. And you'd rock up to schools and the principal would be like, oh, we've got somebody who's confused, we need to change all the toilets to gender. No, you do not need to make them all gender neutral. It's the last thing that child who needs the love, support and care and compassion wants, to be put under a spotlight and all of a sudden change whole systems for everybody. It's confusing for both the person going through it and the people who aren't. Okay, it's as simple as that. We need some common sense. So, of course, I went there and they had a disabled toilet. There was no disabled children at the school, but it was full of storage. I said, great, you've got a standalone toilet there for year 5s and 6s. Simple. There's your answer. Problem solved. Okay? We have to be very sensitive in these issues rather than put what I call as sexual sashes up at every school You walk in, there's rainbows everywhere. They've hijacked one of the beautiful things that was given to us as a sign of hope. Okay, now we need to hijack that back. They do not belong. It does not belong in the hands of these people with these insidious agendas, and I hope they see the light one day, and I'm sure they will. But it's actually it's very cruel for the corporate world to start making sure that this sexual sash is put on people's badges and their rings and their lanyards, and it's disgusting. What grown adults do in their room and what their sexuality is not our business. It is not our business, and more importantly, it's not the children's business. I mean, what are we doing as a society? It's sick. So any of those adults, if you can hear this now, if you are forced to wear a sexual sash, okay, that unfortunately represents deviance, that's all it does now. Okay, there's more and more colours being added to it because they know exactly where they're heading. It's a steam train going to nowhere. Take it off. Tell your boss it doesn't sit well with you. It fundamentally opposes your belief system. You want to protect the children. It's simple. We hijack it back. It's simple. It does not belong in the mainstream, you know, and with same with our advertising standards. They should be G-rated, full stop. You got children in the car, G-rated, done, simple, method over. There's a saying that you can tell the morals of a country by its advertising standards. All right, time for a funny story. I thought we'd get a bit of support for the Freedom Bay. I'm flying along on the freeway with me, probably shouldn't say flying along, I was going at a steady rate. And I'm over the box trailer with the core flutes around it, and just got it the previous day, actually. I'm pretty proud about it, $600. It was $750 on Marketplace, but anyway, he gave it to me $600 because he was sympathetic to the cause. And I thought, you know, we can do this. We're operating on a sniff of an oily rag, flying down the highway, and one person overtakes me and sort of gives me a bit of a wave. I thought, oh, wow, that had me core flutes there. Day one, this is fantastic. Then the next one comes up, and then this looks like a thumbs up. I'm thinking, okay, thumbs up, yeah, I'll take two, that's cool. Third one, fourth one, fifth one. I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. I've got 100% of the voters behind me. This is awesome. 5 out of 5. I know. He grinds his window down the fifth one. He's going, hey, mate, your trailer. And of course, the trailer back is swinging out all over the freeway. All 5 people tried to tell me what was going on. Here I am thinking their supporters going, yep, toot, go to the Freedom Party. So sometimes we can get a bit carried away about the support levels we got. It will be a battle. Much more. Hopefully we get at least one of those 5 voters that passed the car that day. And we need to, and I like what Warren had said, touched on, we need positive alternatives. Okay? We need to be a beacon of hope at this election. Okay, my position, and it's a very personal one, is that I am pro-adoption. You know, we've got, you know, people 1 in 5, 1 in 6 couples are infertile. Well, I was one of those. My wife and I adopted Grace at, you know, beautiful Grace at 1-year-old. She's now 12, 13. That is the answer. That's the solution. These mothers need care and compassion and protection. You know, not just walking straight in there as a first resort. It's like, you know, we're going to damage the life inside you and we're going to damage you for life. And guess what? There is no support mechanism when you walk out. It's disgusting. Same with the gender transitions. It's $40,000 a transition with $3,000 of medications every year. This is a business. It's a license to print money for these organisations that are getting government funding. Don't make any mistake. This is nothing short of another business model. Okay? And it really, I feel really sorry for those children that I've had to help in this, where they've been used as a political pawn. 2 more points for a go, and these are very important. I will touch base on injecting rooms. Okay, my car was locked out in the city when I was campaigning at 9 p.m. The gates went down. I spent a whole night, okay, walking the streets of Melbourne. Very, very different city at night time. Even though the soul's been sucked out during the daytime, very, very different city. And what I'll tell you now, the Current Affair had an interview with me the other day between myself and Daniel, what our positions were, and I said, no, point blank, you do not feed the problem. They need to be weaned off. Okay, the paramedics are sick and tired of going out and about. All the answer is to reload them, inject them and send them back out onto the streets. It's irresponsible. That is not how we look after our brothers and sisters. They need proper rehabilitation and care, and that's why our position is to repurpose the $580 million quarantine that was shut down for a health and community and wellbeing centre, a facility where it's opt-in so we can repurpose these people. In the interest of the group voting tickets, GVTs otherwise known as, these are absolutely critical. And if there's one thing you take today, understand this. When you get your ballot, okay, your blank ballot for above the line, you have 2 options, to vote 1 or a minimum of 5 or more below. 99% of people vote above. Here's the trick. When you put that one in and put it in the ballot box, generally, historically, no one has ever known where that vote goes because the preference card is held out in the background by a consultant who wheels and deals and charges $5,000 for a retainer fee, and should his person get up, they get another $50,000. Therefore, for $55,000, you get the best chance of becoming a crossbench, which has historically happened. Okay? So on the 14th of November, when the group voting tickets are then published on the VEC website, you need to know exactly where that one goes, because there are a lot of wolves dressed in sheep's clothing, and the crossbench, okay, absolutely critical. Therein lies the power. We'll be running in every lower house seat as well, because we want to make an impact below, because I don't believe the Liberals can do it by themselves. And the group voting ticket at the top, please follow your primary vote. Don't just vote one thinking that's where it's going to go. It'll be bounced around. You'll vote for Mickey Mouse over here, and you'll end up with Goofy over here if you don't look at it, because that is absolutely critical. And I do believe that there is a minimum of 8, somewhere between 8 and 12 crossbench seats that will be changed at this election, which is great hope. Okay? Now, leave with the words, and I think we're entering Menzies 2.0, and he came out and collected the Liberal Party together just after World War II, and I've sort of had lots of mentors, right from B.A. Santa Maria as a 16-year-old, listening to his speeches right through all the parties. But I think we need to demonstrate in Victoria that we can be unified, regardless of our obscure differences. It doesn't matter. We have the absolute skeletal structure there, okay? We stick together. If we can stick together in this election, there'll be massive opportunities Australia-wide on the 27th and onwards, and this is what we've got to do. We have to find what our common objective is, focus on our strengths, ignore our weaknesses, and let's start the beginning of Menzies 2.0. It has to happen for the nation's sake. It has to happen. And I will just end on this point, that for 40 days, which is a very pertinent number in the Christian calendar, for 40 days, I will be doing a high noon at Noble Park, outside of Daniel's office. It started 3 days ago. We've only had the Labor Party shut us down once on the second day. That's okay. We forged forth. But for the next 40 days between here and the 25th, I'll be there doing a live press conference at 12 p.m. With a topic every single day with Morgan Jonas, the state leader, on Morgan C. Jonas's Facebook site live. And I just want to say, people like Joel, that this is the future of our media. Okay, the mainstream media will be nothing but a record player or a CD disc in the next 5 years, because this is where it happens. Okay, so I thank you all for everything, for this platform, Joel, and to all the speakers. Let's unify. Let's unify on the 26th. Let's put our differences aside, and let's do everything we can to make sure that we can change the course of Victoria and Victorians. Okay, God bless you all.
Thank you, Aidan, and thank you to our speakers for doing a phenomenal job on presenting people with an alternative view. Now, completely for transparency reasons, I am working with a number of different parties which align with us, not on everything here, but there are a lot of things, anti-lockdown, freedom policies, which I'm also working with them on, just for transparency reasons. And this election, these 9 parties that we're looking at are the ones which are really going hard against Daniel Andrews. Now, I've gotten a lot of thank you while I've been here, and before I go into my presentation, I just want to say this is being live streamed on Turning Point's platforms. I'm the face of the event as the MC, but I did not put this together. I want to thank Ed Sparius for doing all the behind-the-scenes work. Thank you so much. I want to thank you to the host of this event today at their private residence. Thank you, Geraldine, and thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for doing this and opening up your home to us. And I want to say a very big thank you to the live stream that's being done as well. Sorry, can you remind me of the company? Because there's two different companies which are. Ed, do you mind telling me which? Alternative Alternative Imports, absolutely. Now, look, thank you so much to Alternative Imports for live streaming this. Live streams are an absolute headache. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. You're legends. I got a lot of thank you during this, but these are the hard people behind the work. I just rocked up from Sydney this morning and looked pretty, and I'm just emceeing this event. But I want to thank you guys for your and obviously my platform on Turning Point Australia is is here for your exposure because the mainstream media are not giving you any time at all. Now, we all agree with what was outlined. We heard what Bill had to say with his extensive knowledge as a commentator. And we heard the alternative view from many of these parties as well. But how on earth are we going to help them? A lot of people, they have not been engaged in politics. That's why things are so bad after all. This is where Turning Point Australia comes in. We have a gift for the state of Victoria. 4 projects to help fight Daniel Andrews. We're virtually declaring war on the man. So, Turning Point Australia has 4 particular projects which we're rolling out over the course of the next month until the election. The first one is educational graphics to inform Victorian voters of what policies parties are voting on. The second is how to vote cards to help people best number their vote preferences. The third one is a volunteer funnel to help swell the ranks of candidates with volunteers for their campaigns. And the fourth one is, for now, classified. Until the 7th of November or a bit later, we'll be releasing it. I'm very much looking forward to sharing with you more on that. But for now, I can't tell you what it is at the risk of being censored. So, I don't think it's an overstatement in saying that these are game changers. Never before has someone converted their following into how to vote cards and it gone gangbusters. Around the country, in the federal election, we had a big influence on giving people information about the parties. For example, and this is the first project which is coming out as of the 1st of November, election graphics. Very simple graphic, as you can see, from left to right, roughly ranks which parties are more totalitarian than others. So you've obviously got the socialists on the left and you've got the more freedom parties on the right. Now, look, sure, there's a lot of, this was for the federal election, by the way, so if you're looking for your favourite Victorian Freedom Party, you probably won't find them there. But as you can see, there's a very rough idea of where people land on things. Sure, you could tweak around a bit, especially on the far right end of the spectrum, but it's generally correct what's going on. Now, this shows people exactly where parties have what they have in their interest. And they're ranked from small government, freedom of speech and libertarian, compared to the more Daniel Andrews types on the left with big government control, low freedom and totalitarianism. This was just one graphic we put together. It cost us nothing. By the way, all of these projects cost us nothing. And we're putting it out there for people so they have transparency and they can have a game changer on this election. This is probably our most useful graphic we used in the last election. We had the most likely parties on the left that people were going to vote for from the Turning Point Australia audience of 250,000 people. And we ranked all the different policies on the left-hand side of the different policies that are in their interest. So freedom of speech, freedom of religion, many of the topics we've heard here today, pro-life, climate change and energy. We also looked at defence and economics and immigration. Now, that gave you a very general idea of what's going on in the state. You see this sea of green on the left, which basically shows you where these freedom parties or conservative or Christian parties generally land. And on the right, you see the major parties, and you see where they land. And it really highlights to people what the big stark difference is. Now, in Victoria, we will be updating this with new parties, with different policies, because obviously you guys don't have control over defence, for example. But we will be that'll probably be one of the most favourite cards as well. By the way, you might also notice at the top there's a QR code which sends you to the how to vote cards, which I'll talk about in a second. For Victoria, you guys have a very unique voting system, and we are rolling out a very special graphic for your election. So Aidan McLindon spoke before me about the group voting tickets. So he didn't have the maps up, but the way this works is there have been some individuals running around, making deals, and essentially selling your votes above the line. Now, how does this work? You've got the lower house and you've got the upper house. Forget the lower house. This doesn't concern them. In the upper house, you can vote above the line or below the line. If you vote above the line, you can only put a 1. If you vote below the line, you have to put at least 5. Now, most people are lazy like me, and we vote above the line. Federally, you can pick 1 to 6, but on a state level, you can't pick 1 to 6. You only can pick 1, otherwise your vote's invalid. So what ends up happening in Victoria is if you vote 1 above the line, if that person doesn't get up, you don't control where that preference goes. And I think that's outrageous. I'm sure you'd agree with me. Now, what people have been doing, as you can see the regions, there's 8 regions in Victoria. There's 5 on that image on the right, 3 on the left. What some people have been doing is they've been going around to the different regions and to some of the different minor parties, and they've essentially been saying, all right, what have we got? Let's say we've got 5 parties. All right, in this region, we're all going to put him as our number 2. In this region, we're all going to put her as our number 2. And then eventually, everyone gets a turn at getting all the preferences from that little conglomeration of five parties. So what could easily happen is a party could get up on, point something of a vote, very minuscule amount of votes. And some parties have gotten up in the past. This is an absolute design flaw. It's not illegal, but it's highly immoral. I don't agree with it. I think that voters deserve to know about this. And this leads me to the third graphic, which we're doing only for Victoria, because you guys are the only ones that have this problem. On the 14th of November, that is the date that these group voting tickets will come out, which tells you where your vote flows. So if you vote for a particular party, it'll tell you where it flows to. Now, most people in the past, they haven't looked this up. We're taking the hard work out of this. What we're going to do is on the 15th, so the day after, early voting starts on the 14th, the group voting tickets come out, which tell us how these flows happen. On the 15th, my team has 24 hours to release in each region, in each of the 8 regions, we're going to be coming out with a card which looks similar to the policy matrix, except instead of having policies on the left side, you will have the preference number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to the bottom. And what you're going to very quickly discover with the parties along the top, you're going to discover which parties end up preferencing which other parties. So in a specific region, let's say it's the West region, because Bernie happens to be here and I want to, I don't know, embarrass him. I love you, Bernie. In the West region, for example, the West Metro, which you saw in this particular map, the light blue one on the right image, you'll have all the different parties along the top, and underneath you'll have all of the different candidate names, and we will be colour-coding the candidate names with the respective parties. So freedom parties, they'll probably have the green sort of colouring, and the major parties that are anti-you on a lot of these policies, they'll be in red. So if you see the red colours above, you can see that the freedom parties have been shafted, and you can see that your votes are going to major parties like the Labor Party. Now, this is just the facts. This is just transparency. So I was thinking about springing this on people when the 15th comes around, but I thought, you know what? I reckon this might, for those people listening online, I think that this might deter some parties. There's still time. They don't have to submit this till, I think, the 11th of November. You still have time to understand that if you go the course of trading preferences in a way which leads people to vote for interests and policies that are against their interests, as seen on this policy, you will be exposed with these very simple graphics, and these graphics will have how to vote card QR codes at the top, and we will be showing people who to vote for that are in their interests, and this is all free. I'm not making a dime off it. Now, this leads me to the second part of our second project. How to vote cards. Brilliant. If I may say so myself, absolutely brilliant. Why? Turning Point, I had a bit of a dilemma. Turning Point has an audience of 250,000. How can I weaponize that for an election? Well, people, when the elections came around in New South Wales, local elections in December last year, people were not sure how to preference their card. And so I said, okay, well, let's solve 10 problems with this. Put in your address. So this is on the Turning Point Australia website. It's down now, but it'll be up on the 14th of November, so you can do this. You put in your address. We don't keep your address. Don't worry. It's private. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to help you. This is all free. You put in your address and it spits out a how to vote card on the right side, which you can see. And the how to vote card has the lower house and the upper house on the right. Now, this particular project is something which popped off a lot in the federal election. So federally, we had over 250,000 downloads that we could see, but we have no idea what the upward limit of that is. The amount of screenshots where it'd appear as one download, someone would screenshot it and share it to a group chat of 44 people or to their family. We can't track that. So 250,000 is the rock bottom minimum. That 250,000 figure, that ended up defunding the major parties $1.4 million. That's because your vote's worth $2.90 in the federal election. And on a state level, it's worth even more. On a state level, I think your vote in the upper house is worth around about $6 if you get above 4%. And in the lower house, and in the upper house, it's worth, I think, around about $3. Watch me get fact-checked about that. They've done it before. They don't like me, the fact-checkers on Facebook. So what does it do? It defunds the major parties. That's great. It reroutes the funding to parties that you like these fine gentlemen and the other parties that are running, conscience parties, people that actually have beliefs and they don't betray those beliefs when they get into Parliament. And it allows them to build the support from election to election, because that's the problem. We've been lacking a longitude of understanding and strategy when it comes to elections. That's where we come in. What else does it do? It reduces the margins for safe seats. What are safe seats? Well, as you can see, you've got all these different electorates. There are a lot of electorates where it's just like, there's no point in running there. Mulgrave, maybe, you won't beat Dan Andrews. No, I don't believe that for a second. I think you can beat Dan Andrews 100%. But there are some safe seats where, let's use America for example. Democrat, California, Nancy Pelosi, leader of the Democrats in the lower house. No one runs there. Republicans don't like running there because they'll never win. Well, what these how to vote cards naturally do, there's a strategy built into them where we try to reduce the margin so that they're not getting in with 69% of the vote, for example, like Scott Morrison, but we slowly reduce it so over elections, we chip away at that. Because you might have Scott Morrison today in the electorate of Cook on 69% of the vote, but tomorrow you might get someone else. You might get someone worse. So we think that Australia would be far better off if you had 151 marginal seats where politicians are more aware of what their community wants than having 151, safe seats. We don't like safe seats. We want to see them gone. And that's what these how to vote cards have built into the strategy. These cards, they also allow us to efficiently channel the votes. The Labor Party and the Greens, they're in bed together. As much as they like to criticise each other and jump on the news, their preferences transfer, like 90%? Something like that. More than 90%. They're very disciplined. What does that mean? So when you say vote Labor, the chances that they end up voting Green is very high, over 90%. And with the freedom parties, with conservative parties, historically, we're all over the place. We're all over the place. What these how to vote cards do is we guarantee you that at the top of the ticket, as you can see on the grid card, this is what we did for the federal election, we guarantee that the top people, before you get to the Labor, the Liberals, the Greens, the far left socialist parties that you see on this particular graphic, before you get to any of those left ones, we go through the conscience parties. So they all have a chance and we efficiently channel the vote. Absolute gold. This also allows us, our guys, they're struggling over here. They're struggling to get volunteers. Meanwhile, you've got the major parties rigging the system, blocking out all the minor parties. They create legislation to get rid of parties federally like the Liberal Democrats, just for example. And what ends up happening is the major parties have all this money to pay volunteers, $200 a day for, 6-7 hours. We don't have that kind of money. All our volunteers are there not because they're paid, because they genuinely believe what they believe in. Now, what these how to vote cards do, let's take the 250,000 download figure for a second. What they do is it secures the vote. It's in the bank. It's like beautiful. You didn't need to hand out 1 million how to vote cards at a ballot box to get it. No, these are in the bank. This is what people were doing. They were rocking up to the voting centre at their polling booth. They were holding it up like, to say, to sort of ward these people off, these seagulls off. I don't need your vote card. I'm fine. I'm set. I know what I want. I know who I'm voting for. And this is just a resource. You might not agree with it. Maybe you think, oh, you know what? Maybe I don't want this Freedom Party. Maybe I want this other Conservative Party on top. You can twinker around with it. But it's a starting place. It's a template. It's a suggestion, a recommendation. You can change it if you want. This educates people. It tells them who's running. It's nice and easy. It's, you know, no matter what language, you could just follow the logos. If you didn't speak English, it's fine. This particular card as well, and this is for the Victorian election. Normally, so for the white ballot at the bottom, normally we do above the line voting federally because you have less people stuffing the ballot up. For Victoria, we will not be doing that. For Victoria, we'll be giving the power back to you people. We'll be giving you the power below the line. We have found a way to make the design work so that we have below the line voting, and we'll be doing it in a way that allows you to efficiently channel your vote to parties that you like. Because when you vote below the line, the parties don't control the preference, you do. And that's what we're all about. We're about transparency, helping you understand the rules of the game and getting you back in the game, because that's what hasn't been happening. The next project, which is a new one for this election, is we're doing volunteer channeling. Now, I haven't updated this graphic, but one of the things we're doing with the massive audience of Turning Point is we're turning it into volunteers by having a very simple online form. As I said before, the major parties are paying their volunteers. With our conviction parties, they don't have the reach. So we essentially have a form online. You put your name, your number, your email, your electorate, and it'll only be shared with the parties that you click. So there's 9 parties we're partnering with in this particular election. We're not partnering with the Nationals or the Liberal Party, even though there's some good members there. We can't do it without going through HQ, unfortunately, and I'm sorry we can't help you guys, because there are some good politicians still there. But we are partnering with these 9 other minor parties. You can pick multiple parties on this particular form. So if you start getting these emails, guys, get onto it, because if you don't, they might have selected a number of parties, and you know they might get onto this before you. And so this cohesion, which is going to happen, is going to really help tell these. You're going to imagine this: you're running in an area, you have no idea how to get these volunteers, and then these Turning Point emails come through saying, "Oh, here's a person, here's their name, number, email, and their electorate," so you know that they're in your area. And you just flick that through to your little candidates, and you're like, boom, 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 boom. Wow, that's awesome. Absolutely awesome. Again, totally free. We are not charging anything for this. We are a not-for-profit charity. We want to get our country back. We're sick of what's been... I'm 25 and I'm sick of what's been going on. Like, it's really saying something. The final project, which I really wish I could talk about, is a mystery project. And what can I say about this? It's going to bring transparency, what we've never had in this country, and it could quite possibly get my website banned, not just me banned on social media. But I'm doing it because I think that we need to know what our politicians are up to, and I think that they need to be exposed. And this isn't like, you know, this is what I'm doing is I'm taking public information and I'm giving it to you as is. This isn't rabbit hole stuff. This isn't like, you know, QAnon crap. This is legitimate information, which is just, they obscure it in the government websites that no one wants to look up. We're doing the hard work. We're bringing it up for you so that you can understand exactly what's going on. We want you to have all the information, and I'll have more info on that closer to the time. So the dates for these particular projects, if I may go back, the poor tech guys, they're like, Joel's flicking around everywhere. So the dates for these releases, the election graphics, they'll be coming around roughly on the 1st of November, except for the preference flow diagram, which will expose how parties are preferencing above the line. That'll come out on the 15th of November. The How to Vote card release, we're doing it as soon as pre-poll's done, so we literally are working non-stop throughout the weekend. We get the names of the people running on the 11th of November. We will have the How to Vote cards ready to go on the 14th. We're not sleeping. And we will make sure that we have that for day 1 of pre-poll. And then we have a volunteer funnel, which is coming out on the 27th of October, the end of next week, to start giving you guys time to get in contact with these volunteers. And the classified project's coming out on the 7th of November. So I'm looking forward to telling you more about that closer to the time. But thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for providing this platform. And I don't see why we can't make a difference this election. And hey, if it all goes to crap, we would love to have you in New South Wales, because we already have a form of the balance of power in New South Wales under One Nation and the Shooters, Farmers, Fishers and other parties. And we have a very real shot of increasing that balance of power because our politicians are in for 8 years, not 4 years, and it's staggered in the upper house. So we have a genuine chance at creating a Texas for the country. You can't really do that in Queensland because they don't have an upper house, but we do in New South Wales, and at least there we could have a pushback. But for now, you can see that I'm not holding back. I'm not giving up. Turning Point Australia is standing, and we are declaring war on Daniel Andrews, and I'm looking forward to sharing these projects with you guys. Thank you guys so much. So, I did forget, if you want to support some of my work, click the live stream. There's a link there if you want to donate. We run purely off small donations, so thank you guys so much. That's what funds all these projects, not-for-profit charity. We're basically working off volunteers, so thank you guys for funding that. And I'm about to invite the gentleman for a Q&A. Could you please bring your seats over here, and the young lady will be taking us through the Q&A questions from our online listeners. So thank you guys so much. Cheers.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't know if you said, but my name's Yvonne Gentle. So we have some 9 questions, actually, from those that have come in, from those that are watching by the seminar. So I'll start with them, and then we'll go on to the ones that are addressed to specific people here. Okay, so the first question is, can all parties unite together and not stay as different parties and publicise it as a united front? At the moment, the public thinks voting for the minor parties is useless and none of the things promised will ever get passed. Also, should the minor parties start contesting local council elections? Who would like to address this question?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
Is this on? Yeah. All right. So with regard to that question, that's some
Maybe.
battling it out for the eastern region in the upper house. Now, a lot of us minor parties have come together off the back of the federal election, and we've had this discussion. The reality is it's those minor differences between us that make us who we are. Hence my topic of discussion, shared sentiment. We need to find unity through shared sentiment, absolutely, and that's what we're trying to do, but those relationships take time to establish that level of trust. I think we can achieve that, but it's not something we can achieve overnight. But I think to amalgamate all the parties together would be at a detriment to the Conservative movement, because having that option for choice is what defines us as a democratic society.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, look, I agree with what Warren said. This is a question we get asked a lot. I think the main thing is that we work as cooperatively as we can. There are some subtle differences which are important. For instance, the pro-life issue is non-negotiable for Family First. There's some flexibility with some other minor parties. We respect that, but we want to retain certain distinctives. But I think as long as we can make sure that we educate our supporters and the voting public about preferences, and full credit to Aidan, who's done a great job in helping marshal us here in Victoria, I think that's the key thing, because a vote for one of us can equally be a vote for the next one down the line, so long as we are disciplined in the way that we allocate our preferences and follow the how to vote cards at each of us issues. So I think we can achieve some unity through some diversity, but one thing is for certain, if you vote for the major parties, you know what you're going to get, and you're not going to get anything. So we have to be here to bring about change, because if we're not, there won't be any change with the way the majors are going.
Thank you, Lyle. And can you please say your name?
Yeah, Aidan McLindon, Freedom Party of Victoria. I think the Freedom Party was born in response to as an equal and opposite reaction to what we've experienced in the last 2 years, and equally every party has got their historical story. Ours would be the only party that's actually been created in response to that. So when you see 500,000 people in the streets, you look at that and then how can we harness that anger? And of course there's going to be all sorts of marbles in that crowd, like Labor Light, Labor, name it. Now you have to try and getting that into a vehicle is complex in itself, and then in and between other parties is another complexity that I think we've overcome leaps and bounds. The reality is I see this election as a memorandum of understanding. If we can show our collegiality between the 5 or 6 parties with a lot of similarities, I think therein will be a foundation of a Menzies 2.0, and I would say in as little as 3 to 5 years we could have another Conservative Party, which would be a merger of that. It's naturally going to have its factions, as it does, but what the Labor Party does with its 4 factions now, left, right, unity and socialist left, they have their arguments indoors and then come out fortified. There's strengths and weaknesses to that. And unfortunately for the Liberal Party, they have their debates in the public arena. So we need to refine that approach to work out what it is we want to do. But I do believe that this is a pivotal turning point, sorry about the pun, about the minor parties coming together for a much, much bigger collective going forward if we want to have relevance and get this country back on track.
Bernie Finn, DLP. I actually agree with much of what Aidan has said. I think the Liberal Party, if you look at what's happening around Australia at the moment, by this time next year, there probably will not be a Liberal government anywhere in the nation. And you look at the various divisions of the Liberal Party, and I didn't mean divisions, of the Liberal Party in the various states, they all hate each other. They're fighting each other, and I just cannot see a future for a party which is comprised of warring factions, and I do mean warring. They are really going in harder against each other than they are against the ALP or the Greens. You can't continue to exist like that, and I think there are there's an array of smaller Conservative parties that have come about because they're very unhappy with the Libs, with what we've used to being the Conservative side of politics, and I think that we will get to the stage, and I'm not sure whether it'll be 3 or 5 years, but it will get to a stage where people are going to be sick of Labor in government, and if we want to get rid of Labor in government, we are going to have to unite. We are going to have to work together, and I think that history does repeat itself. And Aidan talks about Menzies Mark II. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Somebody's going to have to come along, and I don't know who it's going to be. Somebody's going to have to come along, bring everybody together, and start another Conservative Party, because I think the Liberal Party's cooked. I think it's over for them. The Nationals, you look at some of the Nationals, like in New South Wales, for example, if you can tell the difference between the National Party and the Greens, good luck to you, because there's not a lot of difference. And even some of the people in Victoria, you really struggle to tell the difference. So I believe that will happen. I think there will be a new Conservative Party. It is inevitable that there will be a new Conservative Party, but that will be decided when people get sick of having the ALP in government. Bring that on, the sooner the better, but that's basically what we're looking at.
Should we take the microphone to John Anderson?
Maybe leave it at that end for this one.
Okay, so we'll move to the next question. Have minor parties explored the idea of becoming one party and fight against the common enemy under one name?
Look, I think it's probably much the same question as the last one, but basically now is not the time. I mean, we're not ready yet, and it can't be pushed. It can't be pushed. You can't force it on people. This is going to have to come about. If it's going to come about, it will come about by necessity. That necessity is not right now, we're going to have to find somebody who can unite us, and I'm not sure if there's anybody around who could do that just at the minute either.
Equally, just to quickly comment if you do it, I don't think we should fall into the trap of saying, there's not one big party against Labor. I think there's a lot of validity in moving towards a multi-party system in Australia. I think the more our democracy is spread out and that the power is shared, a distributed form of leadership, I think we'll have a pursuit of best policy rather than just having the Coles and Woolies scenario, which we've seen has crippled this country.
Does anyone else have anything to say on that? Closing comments? No? Okay, we'll move to the next question.
No, just
okay. How can we be giving $1 billion+ to the Ukraine and have homeless living on our streets? How can we ask doctors and nurses to ignore their Hippocratic oath to first do no harm and yet kill the unborn through choice?
Yeah, that's a fairly decent question, that one. One that I've often pondered myself, particularly the latter one, where we say that do no harm is the number one priority in healthcare, but at the same time we're killing babies in the thousands. We're not just killing babies now, but we're killing old people, we're killing sick people. So this and people say, oh, what about the Hippocratic Oath? Well, the doctors haven't sworn the Hippocratic Oath in many years. And that shows. That shows because they are killing babies in their thousands. I mean, since this law was passed in 2008, we have killed in Victoria close to 300,000 babies. Close to 300,000 babies have been killed in Victoria since the Andrews Bill went through in 2008. Of course, many more before that. This was started, the abortion holocaust was started by Dick Hamer when he was the Liberal Premier of Victoria, and he said to the police, back off. So, this is not a Liberal versus Labor thing. They're both guilty. It's a tragedy. As for the money going to the Ukraine, well, that's a long and heated debate about where money should go. And I suspect that will be a long and heated debate for some time to come.
Yeah, I think there's a famous quote that in war the first casualty is truth. So I don't think we should go looking at this as a black and white scenario that either side's perfect. I think that's the first rule of engagement. I think, Warren, is when you're looking at a supposed enemy, I think we've got to look at is that, yes, absolutely, where's that $1 billion end up going? I think we've look at past wars, especially in Afghanistan. There's huge multi-billion-dollar contracts that went to security guards, etc. I mean, if you follow that money trail, it's a bit like the Indigenous funding in Australia. For every $100, how much actually makes it to the front line? Probably $5, maybe $10, maybe. Okay, so
Dan Andrews in the hotels.
Well, that's right, exactly. And I think what we need to see is I think we need to be very prudent about saying, well, hang on, where our responsibilities lie here. But I'm very cautious to all of a sudden jump on a bandwagon to say that either side's 100% correct, and therefore should we send, because the wheels that if anyone's seen a movie I can recommend to you with Nicolas Cage in it called Lord of War. When you follow those monies and you follow the bullets, it's a lot more complicated than meets the eye on the mainstream media. So I'd be very hesitant for our taxes to be going to any one domain in that area. Also with in relation to, as I said, I'm pro-adoption. I make no apologies about that. I've had my own personal experience, and I think that's our positive solution to it. But more importantly, I think what it's reflective of the numbers that Bernie's just told us. I mean, this is a society that is now actually abrogating their responsibility. So what it is that these governments, these communist-thinking people, is when you take the individual, when you shatter the individual and take away individual responsibility, then anything goes. And once you take a belief system, okay, the last thing we have now in the last 2 years is hope. And that's what the government now is trying to diminish. So as long as we've got hope and we have that belief system that then reinstates individual responsibility, I think there needs to be a whole cultural shift rather than just having a first resort of, let's deplete a problem that should never have happened. Well, let's go back to what caused that problem. And I honestly believe the answer to that is the education system. It's been under attack for 30 years and it's going to be a lot of damage to undo, but it needs to start now.
With regard to the war in the Ukraine, Peter Hitchens, the great writer in London, says that this is not a case of Gandalf versus the orcs. It's a complicated scenario. Make no mistake, I do think Vladimir Putin is Lord Sauron and the Chechen mercenaries certainly are orcs. But neither is Zelensky, neither is he Gandalf, nor is he Frodo. It's a complicated situation. I care for the people of the Ukraine who should not be subject to this sort of aggression by Russia. The thing that worries me is that it seems like Joe Biden is determined to, fight this war against Russia to the last Ukrainian. So we've got war and slaughter going on at that end, and I think we should be looking for some sort of negotiated peace rather than fighting a proxy war against the Russians. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not giving Vladimir Putin a leave pass at all. What he's done is wrong, but it is a complicated situation there. Ukraine is a very corrupt country, and Zelensky is not a clean skin. His people deserve all the sympathy and support that we can give them, and that's why I think it's been appropriate to give aid there, but we should be looking to the negotiating table to try and stop the killing. And we should also be trying to stop the killing at the beginning of life that we've been talking about today. And I really think we need to find a way through public education to help our society fall again in love with the unborn, because abortion is a very callous policy. It's callous towards women, it's lethal towards unborn babies, and the documentation of the harm done to women as a result of abortion, it's there hiding in plain sight, and yet it's just covered up by our fake news media. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that public education space.
Just to interject there, we are sort of short on time, so we've got about 10 minutes left to cover all the rest of the questions. Yes, so if you can keep it brief. Thank you.
Yeah, so I won't touch on the inner dynamic of the war in the Ukraine. Suffice to say that it is an interesting dynamic, and we are not getting both sides of that narrative at this point in time. We may not for years yet, we may not ever. The reality is we do have a responsibility to help take care of, you know, the families that have suffered and the displaced persons. And I think if you can direct where that funding is to go, maybe that's more responsible expenditure. However, at this point, we can't. And as we know and we see in this country, you can't just throw more money at a problem, because all you do is create an industry around it. And that's potentially what's going to occur with the entire Western world throwing money at the perceived problem over there. What was the other part of that question?
I just
sorry.
think we
Yeah,
could,
furthermore, homelessness. With regard to homelessness, obviously, it's close to my heart, defence and veteran homelessness. But, however, it's been raised to my attention recently. What's more common now is elderly homelessness and teenage homelessness within this country. And with, you know, rising inflation and living expenses, while interest rates are going through the roof, there's potentially more of this on the card. So, yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt to tighten the belt in the short term and spend more of that money on compassionate grounds at home for our own homeless.
So then we go on to thank you, Bill, for acknowledging that people with unwanted same-sex attraction have been denied any personal choice in Victoria. Many feel isolated and disheartened by this. Thank you for not just addressing the issue with parents of trans kids. This is terrible, but former LGBT people are feeling like they are invisible. So that's not really a question, so thank you for that. Move on to
I think, again, that's shared sentiment that we probably all fall in line with a very similar belief there.
I think we all agree on that. Yes, thank you, Bill. Are there any Freedom parties or candidates in Melton? Well, I don't know that we can answer that, can we?
I can speak for One Nation. We're still taking interviews. We know it's a short time to get somebody endorsed, but if you know anybody in Melton that's value aligned, send them my way and I will interview them and have a chat.
I just asked that questioner to come to our website and get in touch with us.
Well, no, he's a free plug for Tony Dobram. Tony Dobram, he's also our Shadow Minister. For those that aren't aware, we actually released a full Shadow Ministry on the weekend. We've got to be brazen. Unfortunately, if the Liberal Party stepped up to the plate, we wouldn't have to do that, but we did. And we have people with expertise in each of the portfolios. So Tony Dobram is our Shadow Minister for Police and Corrective Services, and an absolute stalwart out there in Melton. And yeah, we need to make sure that we can actually fill the void that has been lacking in, well, the former colleagues.
Well, the next one...
Tell me about it.
Just excuse me for a minute. The next one was, does Family First or One Nation have a candidate for Melton?
Upper House, yes.
So feel free to answer both of those at once.
I think all of us will be running in the upper house, and people are free to obviously vote for the DLP.
Okay. Okay. We'll move on to the last question.
It's all right, we'll all get his vote anyway, if we swap preferences.
We've got 5 minutes left. Second last question. Last question. Can we be confident in the accuracy and legality of the electoral process? Have you any concerns? Well, yes. Having seen 2,000 mules.
Well, I have to say, as former chairman of the Electoral Matters Committee of the Parliament, I have significantly more faith in the VEC than I do the AEC. I think that the AEC, well, it did anyway, left a fair bit to be desired. The VEC, not so much. I think the VEC, until recently, I have to say, where it clearly is taking direction from Andrews about what it should do and what it should say and who it should be censoring. Until that time, I was pretty confident that things would be fine. Not so much now because, as we know, Andrews has politicised everything in this state. From the police, the education system and the VEC as well. So it is a concern to me now that the VEC might well just be under the influence of a premier, of a despot, who will do anything to stay where he is.
So while you've got the... Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, just any shadiness that usually happens in an election will happen prior to it. The VEC, yes, of course, they only succumb to the legislation that's imposed upon them, and that is that the Labor Party can get millions and millions of dollars from the unions. The little guys like us can't. They put a magnifying glass on every piece of paper that you print, and the laws are so stringent you can't. Basically, they suppress dissent. So my faith in the system is there. It's the people ruling the system that's not, and that's where we see, so people who, there's a saying in Parliament, there's a saying in the Labor Party, you vote early, vote often. You've got 20 booths, you wake up at 8 a.m, use someone else's name. This is why they don't want to bring the identification in. So there's lots of little, scurrilous ways, but in terms of the scrutineering, etc., I think that's as authentic as you're going to get in any democratic country. We're pretty lucky on that front. Unfortunately, all the games are played well and truly before the polls open.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I've got a few questions here. So I'll just ask first one to Warren, because I don't think we've addressed this. One Nation, Warren of One Nation, there is an issue where One Nation are not opposing children accessing porn. Also, One Nation does not oppose internet porn probably addressing violence against women. Sorry, it's a bit hard to understand.
Yeah, look, and as a party, we can't have a policy on absolute everything. We will get bogged down in the weeds, and I noticed this in the build-up to the federal election. You have as many policies as you possibly can, but people will still come up and ask you things that don't pertain to anything you have specifically in policy. But as a party, we do hold a conscience vote, and as an individual, I would be voting for anything, to legislate that out of, the standard legal practice. I can't speak for the party on that behalf, but me personally, if I was to be elected, yeah, I would be in alignment with those values.
Okay. Lyle, I'll address this one to you, family first. With school children confiding their sexual concerns with a teacher, do you know what controls are in place to ensure that the teacher isn't a sexual predator?
Look, I couldn't give a definitive answer to that. How would anyone know what controls? I mean, obviously there's a blue card equivalent system here in Victoria, but yeah, how would you know? I mean, that's a question that's impossible to answer.
Okay. Well, we might just be able to get the last one in. Nope.
All right, just on behalf of Cause, just really like to thank everybody who came here, but particularly these four guys here, Bernie and Aidan and Lyle and Warren. We really appreciate their being prepared to come here and to share. And also Bill Muehlenberg, who's come here. His wife's not overly well and he's come here with quite some concerns, so we just really appreciate that. We appreciate the techies who came and did the streaming. We did have a problem with the live streaming. This will be available later on our web page, and also Turning Point will also have it. And I'm presuming, I don't know, did the DLP get their web page, their Facebook going?
Not mine.
Okay, and also One Nation got it going. So this will be all over the place. So if you missed part of Joel's presentation, it's available later on. Really like to thank also Geraldine and Jeff for giving this place and making it available. We also are an organisation that doesn't charge for our services. We did send out our details. We'd really love some donations to cover this. This costs us some money, and if you don't pay up, my wife's not going to feed me for the next few weeks. Okay. All right, so the recording of all this should be available in a few days. Really thank everybody. If we could just thank these guys and also Joel for the wonderful work that Turning Point are doing.